Hello and welcome to the Check Out This Record podcast. My name is Frank, and with me is my good buddy Mark. This is the podcast where we talk about all sorts of musical goodness. We review albums suggested to each other. We make endless lists of music we both love and hate, as well as a wide variety of other musical discussions. You can check us out on Instagram and YouTube. If you like what you are hearing, please tell your friends, leave us a review, and hopefully give us a 5-star review. Mark, why don't you tell listeners now what we have in store for them on this episode today?
It'd be my pleasure, Frank. Today we're talking about bands that have changed singers and what that means for the band and what it means for the fans.
So we're not talking about bands with multiple singers in the band at one time, right?
Yeah, no, we're not talking about Linkin Park, no Crosby, Stills and Nash, no Mamas and the Papas. None of that's on the table. We'll be focusing on bands that have changed their lead singer. We'll touch on a few subgenres in the rock and roll world and see where that conversation leads us.
Gotcha. So why don't we start with one of the most iconic bands to have split with the singer and then bring someone else in, and that is Van Halen. Now, in the previous conversation, you and I have both commented how much we hate David Lee Roth and that we prefer Sammy Hagar. But does that actually make Van Hagar better than Van Lee Roth? Let's compare their albums real quick, gloss over them, and see what we could come up with, okay?
Absolutely. So I'm going to start with the what I dub the Van Lee Roth albums. We're talking about, I believe, the first 6 albums here, if I can count correctly. And then there is a 7th from 2012 that, Frank, I don't know about you, but I didn't even know it fucking existed.
No, not at all.
So obviously there's Van Halen, 1, the self-titled album. Reached 19 on the Billboard music charts, one of music's most commercially successful debut albums, featured most notably Eruption, that awesome finger-tapping song, which just showed off how badass Eddie Van Halen was on guitar, and one of my favorites, Runnin' with the Devil.
Nice.
Van Halen 2 featured the band's first hit single, Dance the Night Away. Really interesting. First 2 albums, you've got a song called Running with the Devil, and the second album has a song called Dance the Night Away. Like, the bipolar nature of this band is so weird. The third album is Women and Children First, released in 1980. Although it was not a success like the previous single, Dance the Night Away, or the cover of You Really Got Me Going, the album itself was well received and further entrenched, the band is a popular concert draw. The song Everybody Wants Some was also a concert staple through the 1984 tour before David Lee Roth left, and continued to be played by David Lee Roth when he left Van Halen additionally. Right. The next album is Fair Warning, 1981, the band's slowest selling album up to this point. It would go on to sell 2 million copies and get mostly positive reviews from critics. I think I've heard this album like once.
Yeah, same here.
Just like, meh. But you know what? It still managed to sell 2 million copies. Jesus Christ. Diver Down, 1982, featured Oh, Where Have the Good Times Gone? And Oh, Pretty Woman. It spent 65 weeks on the charts in the U.S. and would sell more than 4 million copies by 1998.
That's insane.
Yeah, I'm talking 16 years, 4 million copies. That's insane.
Yeah.
The next album, 1984, released in 1984. 5-time platinum just 1 year after its release.
Wow.
5 times platinum after 1 year. It's insane.
It is.
Jump became the band's first #1 hit, garnering them a Grammy nomination, but they lost. Other singles include Panama, I'll Wait, and Hot for Teacher. The album peaked at #2 on the Billboard charts, only behind Michael Jackson's Thriller. Yeah, that's like, you look at an album with Jump, Panama, and Hot for Teacher on it, and you're like, how is that not #1? Yeah, the only answer is Thriller.
Yeah.
And last, again, the last David Lee Roth album, 2012's, God only knows how they were able to get this record together. A Different Kind of Truth. Like I said, I didn't even know that album existed until really doing some research today. So before we jump into Van Hagar, did you know that Sammy wasn't the first choice to join the band?
You know what? Refresh me on that, because I know that his introduction to the band was through someone else. I think his car and Eddie's car got maintenance at the same place, and
Correct.
Sammy was already a legitimate solo star who I believe even took a pay cut to come to Van Halen. But tell me about who was going to go on there before.
Yeah, so they were introduced by their mechanic. Sammy had just had a hit with Can't Drive 55.
Yep.
But actually there was a woman named Patti Smith of a band called Scandal. Now, not Patti Smith, New York punk rock 1975, quote unquote punk rock laureate. I can't stand her, most famous for that dumb album Horse. But Patti Smith of Scandal declined, and that's when the mechanic suggested to Eddie that he check out Sammy Hagar. And that's, it's kind of crazy, especially as we get into the Van Hagar albums. The fact that this dude wasn't the top choice is insane.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, and just think too of a lot of those albums that you named on the Lee Roth times. It's like certain ones, like Fair Warning and Diver Down, I barely have listened to, but it's just the insanity of it too. And they had three really popular covers. I mean, in Women and Children First, you had You Really Got Me, and Diver Down, you had Old Pretty Woman, and I believe Dancing in the Street was also in there too. So they made a point to hammer home the covers. And then in 1984, that album, you said really, it just, a lot of it peaked only behind Michael Jackson's Thriller, which ironically on the following album would beat it. Eddie Van Halen played the guitar on that, so that's pretty crazy that's intertwined on there.
Yeah, and remember that Eddie Van Halen didn't show up for the music video for "Beat It" because he didn't think it would be a hit.
That's right. That's crazy. Yeah,
more proof that Eddie Van Halen is just dumb lucky and not an intelligent person.
Yeah, I think maybe that's what's going on, right?
Yep.
Oh man, well, this is just crazy to think about everything. It was a crazy time for music, and now they transition over to Sammy Hagar, and shall we get into that?
I'm ready when you are for a little Van Hagar.
Cool. And just let me correct myself. On Thriller was Beat It too. For some reason, I was thinking of the album after what bad. But anyway, the Thriller. On Thriller, there was Beat It. So just wanted to clarify that. All right, so here we go. They get Sammy in, who's already established. He took a pay cut to be with Van Halen. Now, don't feel bad, folks, because in the end, Sammy gets the last laugh with eventually selling his liquor company for more than $90 million. So he's okay at the end of the day. But 5150 in 1986. It's the band's first number one album. Additionally, all the 4 Van Hagar albums would go to number one, and 17 singles are made to go at least in the top 12 and released on the Billboard charts. So, but back to 5150, it's driven by the keyboard-dominated single "Why This Can't Be Love," which peaked at number 3. "Dreams," which is a very interesting track, and of course, Sammy's Hagar with "Extraterrestrial Forces" with "Love Walks In." Next, in 1988, we get OU812. OU812. That's exactly what it is, right? You get "When It's Love," "Cabo Wabo," and "Black and Blue." They're all huge hits. In 91, I remember this album very specifically. We get "For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge." And Mark, do you know what all of that stands for?
Yeah, actually, Sammy Hagar wanted to call this album "Fuck" in an attempt to deal with the growing popularity around censorship, but eventually backed down and settled for unlawful carnal knowledge in its place. So yeah, I mean, just that speaks to me. So I'm pretty proud of Sammy.
Nice. So that, again, was in 91, spending 3 weeks at number one in the charts and 3 huge hits: "Pound Cake," "Top of the World," and "Right Now," which, I mean, around that time you could not get. Right Now was just everywhere. It was absolutely everywhere. That song was on all the stations, the radios. I mean, it was a massive hit. So that's 91. And then in 95, we get "Balance," 5 single. And this was the beginning of the end of the Van Hagar. And it shows with kind of how forgettable this album is. A couple of tracks here and there, but I mean, really, really nothing at the end of the day. So how do these two bands compare? Because they are really two different bands. You get Lee Roth and Van Hagar. Can Hating a Dude for being so over the top and full of himself hurt in the rankings? And he's got two albums of work over the other. So should they have changed their name? Let's have the open discussion, Mark. Kind of your thoughts. And, we don't have to mention Gary Sharon if you don't want to. So go ahead.
Well, I mean, I'll mention him.
I know you will.
Every time we talk about Van Halen, I have to ask you what his name is.
I know.
So that's how forgettable that was with Van Halen 3. Mm-hmm. Personally, my true introduction to Van Halen was for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. I remember my brother got that CD, and I don't know how or from where or what happened, but that thing was awesome. And then he got the almost immediately after they released a live album called Right Here, Right Now, which had a ton of Sammy stuff on it and was awesome. So for me, because I can really, let's say Sammy's got one album that just kind of doesn't really hold up, but he's got three great, to me, Balance is just boring. Yeah. Three really great records. But when you look at Van Halen, really, we're also talking, David Lee Roth, we're really looking at three good records.
Yeah.
So, to me, and maybe it's because I didn't, catch the craze as David Lee Roth and Van Halen were first taking off, and it just doesn't mean anything to me because I came in the Hagar period. I just like it better. I know it's more keyboard driven. It's a little more kind of straightforward rock and roll, a little less experimental than that early stuff. But the early stuff also got stupid silly.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't dig. What's your thoughts, Frank?
So, it's funny, and I said this last time. These guys are forever linked to each other, and they couldn't be more on opposite sides of the spectrum with things. You get this really flamboyant singer in David Lee Roth, who was instrumental in the band. I mean, when you still think of Van Halen, I know it goes right to the David Lee Roth songs, and Talking About Love, Running with the Devil, all that stuff. Here's the thing, though. He can't sing. He couldn't sing then. He can't sing now. I have a friend of mine who saw him live and had to leave. Okay. And that just goes to show you, YouTube any of his vocal performances, it's not good. So then you get Sammy, right? And the songs, maybe a different style. Maybe some of the fans were not used to it. Like you said, a little keyboard driven. I mean, Dreams to me sounds like a theme song. It's like a 90s sitcom, with vocals over it. But here's the thing though, Sammy could sing. Sammy hits unbelievable notes. Live, he is on spot, right? And that live album you referenced here you go. So with Hagar, they sang some Roth songs, right? You had Panama, you had Ain't Talking About Love, a couple others I can't think right off the top of my head, but I think he nails Ain't Talking About Love. Now, David Lee Roth never sang the Hagar songs. Why is that? Is that because he felt that they were inferior? No, my hunch is that he can't hit those notes. And you can never hear David Lee Roth singing a song like Dreams, even right now, any of those things. So I'm with you, man. I think Hagar brings it home for me. I get, though, why people might go ahead and just equate it, though, to David Lee Roth. But for me, it's Hagar all the way, man.
Yeah. So do you think the band should have changed its name?
If it was someone else who was subpar, but Sammy he was already an established force. He had hits already. His vocal performance was great. I personally don't think so. I mean, the Van Halen brothers were still in there, and there's even another Van Halen member in there to this day. No, I don't think they should have changed their name. What about you?
Yeah, I think for separating it, I would have liked to see a different title. I'd like to see them get that clean break.
Yeah.
But, Sammy could do the Lee Roth songs. So, it worked for him.
It did.
All right. So, this one I'm the most excited of between the two of us.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Black Sabbath.
Bring it on, man. Bring it on.
Now, I've been very vocal about being a huge fan and apologist for Ozzy since middle school, I would guess. But I must admit that Ronnie James Dio is a badass. And the Sabbath albums featuring him are badass as well. Frank, do you even have a dog in this fight?
Yeah, I mean, listen, obviously I'm going to equate a lot of this to Ozzy, but I remember my introduction to Dio. It was a song in the background. It was over my friend's house, and I don't think it was just a Dio song. It was with Sabbath, and this voice came over, and I was like, holy cow. We talk about voices with Sammy Hagar. This is a voice that's really on another level. Like, most people don't get that, and this is almost kind of like that equation, right, with the Roth and Hagar, almost with Ozzy Dio, a little bit differently, because I don't want to say that Ozzy is Roth by any stretch of the imagination. My Sabbath, though, Dio days probably does need some brushing up on. As a singer, vocally, I mean, Dio is on point, but as a front man, well, it's Ozzy. He is and always will be Black Sabbath, right? He's the voice, he's the front man, the appeal. But as far as being like a technical singer, I mean, Dio is it's Dio, right? So that's kind of my take, but I want you to kind of go into more details because I know you're really passionate about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for simplicity, we'll refer to these as Oz Sabbath and Dio Sabbath. We'll kind of break them down. I'll go through the Ozzy stuff. Frank will go through a bit of the Dio stuff.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about like the 9 other dudes that sang. It's easy to forget that with 19 albums, studio albums, right? Because there's a bunch of live recordings too. Like there's a ton of Sabbath shit. Ozzy only sang 9 albums, right? Which it seems like he did a lot more. And Dio only did 3, which throws a lot of people off. People think that it's an even split, but it's not. In fact, there's a dude who sang more Sabbath albums than Dio did. This dude Tony Martin, aka the Cat. I don't know how he got that nickname. I found it on Wikipedia today, and if I ever meet him, he's never living it down.
Never.
But nonetheless, so Ozzy, and I think for a lot of people, Ozzy and the first 3 records of Sabbath really is what they
changed
consider
the world. I mean, it changed everything.
Absolutely. It's really and I'll fight over this. It's the first heavy metal record. I know some people like to suggest that it was Zeppelin, but shut up. It was Sabbath. There is a funny story that we'll talk about when we get to Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, or no, excuse me, Sabotage. I'll get to that.
Cool.
But yes, so the first album, the self-titled album, which included the self-titled track. So, the track Black Sabbath on the album Black Sabbath by the band Black Sabbath.
Yes.
Arguably the birth of heavy metal, and its own subgenre. Jesus Christ, what is in my mouth? Doom featured some of awesomeness, such as that self-titled album, The Wizard and NIB. This is an iconic album. It opens with that big rainstorm, and it's just melancholy all the way through. This album, it's so awesome.
Did you have a dream about? I remember back in our band days, and I'm sorry to interrupt. You had like a dream in reference to the song Black Sabbath, like you were kind of living through that. Am I mistaken that with another conversation we may have had?
I mean, I don't remember that.
I just remember you saying like that song was just prominent in your dream. But I remember I was talking about the record though back then, and just what an awesome record. My apologies, man. Head on to the next. Next record.
Yeah, I don't remember that at all. But that was in 1970. Also in 1970, probably what most people consider to be the seminal album, Paranoid. War Pigs, the song Paranoid, Planet Caravan, Iron Man, Fairies Wear Boots, and one of my personal favorites, Electric Funeral. Just a badass record. It's got most of the hits people will name when they're talking about Sabbath. It's just a cool record, iconic as all get out. Master of Reality, 1971, featured Sweet Leaf, Children of the Grave, Into the Void. I mean, just a cool record, man. Volume 4, this is where things start to change, including the song Changes, and Snowblind, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. The title track alone carries 90% of that record's.
Sabracadabra is really good too.
Yeah, no, it's just a cool record. So 1975, Sabotage The band would later say this is the only album they ever did with lawyers in the studio because there was a contract dispute between the record labels, which might explain the overall angrier tone, which we'll touch on in a little bit. I asked Frank to listen to this record.
Yes.
Because, again, he's not a huge Sabbath fan. He knows most of it. This, to me, is a great bellwether of when that band, when Sabbath with Ozzy was super tight. So we'll kind of just touch on it and get some reactions from Frank later. But Sabotage was great. One of the other fun things is there's interviews with Tony Iommi, the guitarist, and Geezer Butler, the bass player, in which Tony Iommi is quoted as saying that recording it was awesome because Led Zeppelin would come in and jam with the band. That's later been disputed because during the dates of the recording, Led Zeppelin was in the U.S. touring, so they couldn't have possibly done it. And then Geezer Butler is quoted as saying, "I didn't even know what we were doing."
No way.
Yeah, they were just wasted. It's awesome. But it's a great record. And then Technical Ecstasy, 1976. You can really start hearing the band and Ozzy starting to separate from each other. Yeah. It got a little more rock forward and less kind of metal. The song Dirty Woman, it's the last song on the album. In recent shows, they've been known to continue playing this one. It's a cool song. And then, of course, 1978's Never Say Die, the last Ozzy album. Yeah. Kind of the notes just kind of spill over from Technical Ecstasy. They just got a little rockier, and Ozzy kind of got a little bit further away. So, and then, of course, in 2013, they released an album called 13. Right. I can tell you that my brother, Seth, really digs this record. Wow. It's got a lot of feeling like some of the old Sabbath stuff to it, but doesn't really do anything that new or interesting. Kind of proof in the pudding that if you just throw out a new record after a long time, people will buy it. Yeah. But, hey, to Seth's credit, hey, look, it's a rock and roll album. It does exactly what you bought the ticket for. So that's the Oz Sabbath category. You want to jump into the Dio Sabbath? Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that stuff towards the end there, with Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die, it was like a lead up of eventually what he would do with like A Shot in the Dark, that kind of big rock sound. You put it in the best way. You could feel it kind of inching in that direction, and really him separating at the end of the day from Sabbath. And then we get the Dio Sabbath album. So we get Heaven and Hell in 1980. It's the first album with Dio. It hit number 28 on the U.S. charts. You can really feel the band coming together. It's got a great drive and weight to it. Neon Night is the title track. Heaven and Hell and Die Young, they're all killer tracks. Mob Rules, which I was listening to earlier today during my run, so you could hear that the band was really starting to gel with Ronnie here. It's I know we're not going to go track by track into it, but I listened to Sabotage also too, which I know we wanted to talk about. But Mob Rules was a really, really cool album, and I listened to it twice because I kept running for a long time. I just kept running today because that's what you got to get out. This is the outside time. But turn up the night, Voodoo, the song Mob Rules, Country Girl. Even the finishing track Over and Over. Again, it showcases the vocal ability. It showcases his vocal ability. And I like it. Mark, do you have a quick take on Mob Rules that you wanted to add? Or yeah, so I asked you to listen to Mob Rule and to Sabotage because I really think that they speak to the best of what Sabbath does with each of these singers. Yeah. What I think is most notable is that both singers take the model that they used on these records and apply them to their solo careers. Yeah. I think if you look at them as personalities with this amazing backing band to them, and the reason I say that is because Geezer Butler, Bill Ward, and Tony Iommi are the backing band for all of these records. Yeah. Nobody has quit yet up to Dehumanizer, and then there's some juggling of drummers, and then Bill Geezer Butler leaves, and there's a whole workup of things. But this is still the core band. The band is at its best. I think if you view Ozzy kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Metaphorically, as a little heavy metal demon, and you listen to him sing, you kind of get that. You understand that he's just kind of like a demonic force within the band, not necessarily acting against it, but representing it. And then if you look at Dio as kind of like Gandalf the Grey from Lord of the Rings, he's like kind of the great wizard, and he presents the band in that way as though he's coming from this great, triumphant land, and just sings in just such a falsetto and just such an operatic, epic way. They both take the style and really apply it to their solo careers, and are very successful with it.
Totally.
So that's kind of why I picked those two records for you to check out. And it's interesting to see how, when you take the same bass for two different things and you add, a little demon to one and a little wizard to the other, what those things end up doing, and how they only change a little bit, but those changes are noticeable and drastic.
Yeah. So, it's crazy how that happens.
Yeah.
Dehumanizer too, right? So then that was in we get 92 where Dio rejoins the band. This is now after 11 years from the last album, and Time Machine is one that I recognized, of course, from Wayne's World soundtrack. But that's kind of really it from that the Dio Sabbath albums. But we get a couple other singers here too, Mark. One's a very famous guy. He fronted the band. Oh, I don't know, Deep Purple. Do you want to go into that?
Yeah, well, ironically, so Ian Gillan, the singer of Deep Purple, was on the album Born Again, and then in 1983, then 86, the bass player from Deep Purple joins the band. Oh no, excuse me. That's right. It's kind of funny because Seventh Star in 1986 was supposed to be Tony Iommi's first solo album.
Yeah.
But because of the contract, it became Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi, right? Which is weird because he's the only one to play on every Sabbath album. So I know that when people think of Sabbath, they think of Ozzy, but really you should be thinking of Tony Iommi.
Yeah.
Because he's the one constant through all of this. But this is where the bass player, and I completely lost his name, I thought I wrote it down, began playing, became the singer for Black Sabbath. So there's a really big Deep Purple thread, of course, because earlier in his career, Ronnie James Dio was in Rainbow, with half of Deep Purple.
Yeah.
So it's really this kind of incestuous love triangle. It's pretty really crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how they're all kind of related, right? In some way.
Yeah. You don't think of Deep Purple as being that heavy.
No, but some of the songs they are though, and I guess they really kind of led it up for what was to be. I wouldn't say it's, of course, some people might say it was heavy metal. Of course, I believe it started with Sabbath, but they did have some heavy hitting tracks,
Yeah.
Well, then we get into let's see, Tony Martin, right? Who's the Cat?
It's the Cat.
So we got the External Idol in '87. That's the first to mention the Cat. These I'm not overly familiar with, to be honest with you.
This for me even gets like.
Does it?
What are we talking about? Who is this now?
Yeah,
it gets really, really kind of out there.
Headless Cross in '89. You get in '90. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The Seventh Star. That singer was Glenn Hughes, the former bass player.
Got it.
Sorry, that was going to bother me.
No worries. I'm glad you found that out too. Headless Cross in '89, which is funny. That's what Tony Martin as well. Then there's what, 3 other albums after that too? What is this here? I'm seeing in 1990. This is THR. How would you say that, Mark?
TYR, I believe it's
TYR. I'm sorry, Tire. Yes.
Oh crap! I didn't write that down. That may be Tony Martin as well, because he's got the second most frontman albums for them.
Yeah, I was looking at my notes here too, and I was like, wait a minute. I was like, is that am I saying that right? That's Tire, TYR, huh?
I'm sure it's probably Tire. Yeah, so that's Tony Martin as well, which is crazy. This dude sang on a ton of stuff, and really the only ones available to listen to, like on Spotify. You guys know that's kind of our cheating place to go for Sabbath albums.
It really
is the Eternal Idol. You hear it. He's no Ronnie James Dio. He's no Ozzy Osbourne, but it works.
Funny how that happens.
It's he's kind of where I get that, like, what? Because there was the gap, obviously, between Tire and Cross Purpose in '94, where Dio came back and did Dehumanizer, which is just I don't want to call it silly, but it's kind of silly. And then he comes back and still does 2 more records.
Right.
Tony Martin does. So it's an interesting mix. He really. So you get the 2 guys from Deep Purple. You get this dude Tony Martin. You get Dio. You get Sabbath. Or you get Ozzy. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So who do you like better? And it's perfectly okay to pick whoever you're going to pick.
Sure.
And should the band have changed names? And if so, at which point?
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's do it like this. And again, I'll be honest, I would probably need like a week to really sit and listen to the Dio Sabbath albums a little bit more in detail. But here you go. So singer, I think it's Dio, better range, more skilled, more consistent. Artist, I guess Dio almost by default because of the things I said earlier. But front man is Ozzy, right? For the lyrical content and the delivery.
Ironically, Geezer Butler was the primary lyricist for the band up until he left.
Right?
So really, like, lyrically, he may have written a little different for Ozzy than he did for Dio, but he's kind of still that central force in writing most of the songs. So it's interesting. I think both of their and not to just step
no, go ahead.
Both of them have very different approaches to performing their craft and for heavy metal. So it's really just these 2 very interesting dynamics, really, of how they approach. I think with Dio, if they had chosen another name, I think some of that pressure may have been off of them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the Black Sabbath brand.
Right. So it's a brand. Van Halen's a brand, Black Sabbath brand.
But, that Black Sabbath brand, we're talking about, those 4 of the 9 or 8 at the time Ozzy albums were massive.
Yeah.
They were insanely huge. With it doesn't even really let up until Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die. Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, and Sabotage were big albums. Volume 4 was a big album. The 3 first albums were huge. So really you're talking about 2 albums that kind of tender. And like I said, 13 is 13. You know what you bought that ticket for. I think the biggest strike against Dio is that there's just not more material.
Right.
And like, even when you look back at Dehumanizer, like, that album's, it's kind of a joke, just because it's just a little over the top, and that's Dio's style, to be over the top. But when you look at it, it's just kind of like, there's a song called Computer God, TV Crimes.
Yeah.
Time Machine. It's just not very Sabbath.
It's almost like sci-fi-ish, as opposed to...
Hey, look, as a Dio album, it works. You kind of expect that camp out of it. But as far as, Sabbath, to me, it didn't really work. So for me, I think Ozzy's got, the albums and the legacy behind him. Dio's a fantastic performer. Go look at that YouTube footage. If you can find, professional quality concert footage of him, it's fantastic. He's amazing. He's got some great songs. I definitely, and maybe we'll look sometime at Dio solo albums versus Ozzy solo albums. I don't know that that's going to be necessary around the corner, because it's going to be a lot of the same conversation we're having right now.
Yeah.
But definitely a fun one to look at. And, as you put those records next to each other, like, just compare what you think your favorites are, and see who stacks up. Maybe Dio does win out.
Yeah, it's here's the thing. It's one of those things where it's a little tougher, for me at least, and it's not like a clear cut like, listen, Hagar's a better singer, and Roth is just flamboyant and jumping around. This is tough. I mean, they made again their name, their brand with Ozzy. If you had Ozzy and Rainbow or doing Dio solo stuff, like it wouldn't work, and maybe some live performances of Dio kind of doing the Ozzy stuff, it didn't necessarily work either. So I think you have to give it to Ozzy, but Dio though on his own is definitely sustainable, and he was a true artist as well. So
yeah. Well, you know what I think makes this comparison harder than the Van Halen comparison is that we're talking about and honestly Ozzy's last few dozen solo albums don't help me with this argument, but we're talking about two competent singers, whereas David Lee Roth, we're not talking about a competent singer.
Yeah.
We're talking about a showman who had a great backing band.
Right, exactly.
They did a ton of covers for a reason. With Hagar, they just ripped. So with this, we're looking at two very competent singers, two very competent entertainers who really were able to put out some great stuff. So, but definitely for me, if you haven't listened to Mob Rules in a long time, check it out. Definitely listen to Heaven Hell. That record's awesome. And check out some of the later Ozzy stuff too. Sabotage is an awesome record. Sabbath Bloody Sabbath is an awesome record. Like you just can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
Sabbath stuff. So how about we jump into some punk rock?
Yeah. Yes, please.
So we're going to touch on the biggest staple of punk rock, and with a few smaller bands as well, for the nerds like us who want to talk about that stuff. But why don't we start with All?
No All, Mark.
Correct.
All right, All. So most famous for being the band that isn't the Descendents, but featuring everyone but Milo from the Descendents. So we still have Bill Stevenson on drums, Carl Alvarez, on bass, and Stephen Egerton on guitar, as they all going through three singers each with their own style and contribution to the band's legacy. So we have Dave Smalley, best known as the lead singer for hardcore bands DYS and Dag Nasty, as well as lead vocal and guitar on Down by Law. He was the singer on the first two All releases. So we have Alroy Says, the LP, and Alroy for Prez, the EP. Only Pretty Little Girl is on both, but the Prez features Skin Deep, which is a great song. I Hate to Love, both written by Carl Alvarez. Then we got Scott Reynolds in 1989. We get Alroy's Revenge, She's My Ex, and Carnage. Fantastic songs, by the way.
Awesome stuff.
I mean, just love them, especially Carnage is what a track. In 90, we get Alroy Saves, Educated Idiot, Just Like Them, which is a Milo song. And then in 92, we get Percolator, you get Dot, and then you get the Chad Price era. 93, you get Breaking Things, Shreen, Guilty, Original Me. Mark, I know that's one of your favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Cause, Birthday IOU. Then in 94, you get the album that I am solely responsible for getting it on Spotify after my meeting of Chad Price, and that's Pummel. It's their only major label release, Self-Righteous, $1,000,000, Miranda, Breaking Up, Black Sky. Then we go back to the Descendents.
Yeah, would you mind just reaching out and getting some more of the Tony Martin Black Sabbath on Spotify for me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Please, if you could just reach out to your contacts.
Yeah, you got it. I will make the calls. I will make it happen. If he plays a small acoustic show, then I'm going to see him. Well, when all this is over, then we're able to go out in the world.
Fair enough.
96, we go back to the Descendents, right, Mark? I know Everything Sucks. You love that album.
Mm-hmm. I do.
And if there's a cut on the internet and Mark gave me, I know, years ago for my birthday, which is an amazing birthday gift, by the way, which Chad sings most of this on there, minus what Milo brought to the table, worth a listen. In 88, we get Mass Murder, The World's on Heroin, I'll Get There, great song. Fair Weather Friend, Until I Say So, another great song. Think the World, great song. I mean, Honey Peep, Silly Me, Romantic Junkie, Vita Blue, Until Then.
That's 98, by the way.
98, what did I say, 99?
You said 88.
88, woof.
Yeah.
98, thank you.
No worries. I mean, I realized that would have involved time traveling, but it's all right.
Yeah, it can't happen. But 2000, we get Problematic, Carry You, Better Than That, www.sarah, What Are You For, Stupid Kind of Love, Teresa, I Want Out, The Skin, another fantastic song, Make Believe. It's a lot of records, Mark. We know the Descendants Day, so we didn't have to kind of, build on those. What's your thoughts of all the stuff All was doing? I mean, they changed names, but kind of kept also the brand, the way they were able to do it. I thought it was done very intelligently. Just what are your thoughts?
Well, so for me personally, I'm a Chad Smith guy. I like the way
Chad Price.
Excuse me. Chad Smith's the drummer from
Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Of which I'm not particularly a large fan. Chad Price, excuse me. I like his era. I think he brings a little bit more aggression, a little more anger towards to the band. Scott Reynolds was awesome. He kind of had kind of an everyman quality to him. Some of the songs he wrote were fantastic. Obviously, Percolator is a tough listen.
Yeah.
And then of course the first two, All Roy Says and All Roy's for President. Those are cool records, man. You can really feel them trying to figure out what life after Descendants is about. You get this kind of fuller sound. I think it's really cool that we see them. But for me, I kind of worked my way back. I think Chad's my favorite of the three singers. The band did historically have a problem of not being the Descendants, especially when you look at Everything Sucks. You can hear that demo. And yes, it's a demo and it's been bootlegged onto the internet. So the quality is not as good. I've seen some reviews where people are like, I don't know, the Milo version sounds better. Well, yeah, the Milo version's been mastered, you idiot.
Yep. Yeah.
So, but listen to the songs for what they are. Listen to his approach to those songs and the way he sings them. It's awesome. I hope that one day when they re-release the album years from now on, like a 20th anniversary or something, or 25th, I guess at this point, I hope we get to see some of the Chad stuff get polished and come to life, because I really like to dig that album. And if you look at Masked Nerder and Problematic, those fucking albums rock, dude. You can hear the band really just solid straight through them. There's some really, really great songwriting. Carl Alvarez and Bill Stevenson really write some meaningful personal songs that'll cut you if you're not careful, because they're that good. It's hard to say whether or not
it is,
by changing their name, they hurt themselves. Because, when they first came out, they tried to stay away from the Descendants songs and be their own thing. And then, of course, when that didn't work and they went back to doing some Descendants song, Scott Reynolds will tell you that, people were telling him he's not Milo and to go away. So it's one of those really weird things. Personally, I like All. I think both bands are fantastic, and if you made me pick between the two of them, I'd have a really hard time.
Yep.
Because I really love the All stuff, and I really love the Descendants stuff too. It's tough, man.
Yeah. It's a tough one. Here's the thing that didn't happen is that when they made the transition to All, the songs didn't get bad. In fact, the songs got songs got really, really good. I mean, Pummel, I love Pummel. Like, I was obsessing, right, Mark? I was obsessing for the longest time that it wasn't on Spotify to stream. And the minute I found it, it was absolutely just as amazing as it was when I first listened to it in the 90s. Breaking Things is also fantastic. I love Chad. I love the grittiness of his voice. I love the stuff he does too with his other outfits, from solo to Drag the River as well. The All songs are still amazing, and it's crazy to think about it, because they did Milo Goes to College, which is arguably one of the best punk rock albums of all time. And then it's like, okay, well, I mean, Milo went to college, so they had to figure out something. I don't know. I think they just done it again in such a good way. Did they get hurt by it? Maybe. I mean, do more people go to see a Descendants show than an All show? Yeah, probably, absolutely. But I think in the end it worked out for them. I think in the end there's still a legacy with both. And, I always enjoy hearing anything from them. So I'm a fan of both.
Very cool.
Yeah, man.
So we're going to jump into, related to the Descendants, and one of the most impactful bands in punk rock history. Let's take a minute to talk about Black Sabbath again. No, I'm just kidding. Talk about Black Flag.
There you go.
a bunch of singers here.
A lot
Keith
of
Morris,
singers. Yeah.
He's just on the first EP, Nervous Breakdown in '79, and then he does reappear in some of the compilations where they re-release some stuff. But we also get Ron Reyes, '79 to '80. He's on the EP Jealous Again. And then in 2013, they did another record.
Yeah.
I had heard of it, but at this point, I don't know what was going on with me. But I was like, I'm not listening to another. I don't need a new Black Sabbath LP. Ironically, this is
Black Flag.
Black Flag. God dang it. Ironically, this is the only Black Flag album that Rollins didn't sing on. Only one to be the singer on an album. Otherwise, the rest of the EPs, they kind of bounce around with other singers. But we'll get to that. Des Cadena sang on the single for Louie Louie and the original 6-pack EP.
Right.
Rollins then, 81 to 86, really kind of a short career, really the band's career overall. I got grand total 76 to 86, they kind of say, and then, whatever the reunion stuff, nobody counts. So really 10 years, they pumped out a ton of music. Damage in 81, TV Party in 82, My War in 84. Bill Stevenson was the drummer and producer on that. So there's the Descendents tie-in. Family Man. This was the first one to feature a spoken word track by Rollins. And had the first of like the really jazzly influenced instrumental tracks called Armageddon Man. Which is something we definitely see progress from here with that kind of like hardcore jazz thing. 84, we see Slip It In. 85, Loose Nut. The process of weeding out in 85 also, it's an LP. Note of interest on this one is the first time the band is described as jazz punk.
Wow.
Which is really interesting. It's the first time where like jazz is directly like a theme throughout, and it's just not like one song happens to be an interlude. In My Head, 1985, the last full-length album, for the last LP for the band, other than that 2013 release called What The. It is interesting. There is another singer, Mike Vallely.
Yeah.
I think most commonly referred to as Mike V. He's also a pro skater, and he was the band's manager. But Des was singing again on one of these reunion things there in Australia. He got fired supposedly in the middle of a show, and I wasn't there. And then that's when Mike V continued to sing for the rest of the tour, and apparently any subsequent tours he's also been the singer for. No recordings yet, other than some live stuff you can find online with Mike V as the singer. There are a bunch, as I mentioned, of best of / comps worth noting. Everything Went Black, released in 82, features like most of the early stuff. It's got all of the Keith Morris stuff, Ron Reyes and Des Cadena. 83. Black Flag released the first 4 years, which was basically more of the same stuff, but plus Chuck Dwowski on a track called You Bet We've Got Something Personal Against You.
Nice.
So, yeah, a lot of Sabbath. God damn it. I'm just really I've been listening to Sabbath all day. I had a lot of fun doing that. Anyways, there's a lot of stuff to unpack. There was certainly a ton of EPs. There was a ton of like little stuff for Black Flag that really, is what got them known. And it's interesting, certainly, when you look at those first few EPs and then the first few records, how many songs were we're just going to do that again. We're gonna re-record it with Henry. So for me, Black Flag is synonymous with Henry Rollins. I really like Keith Morris in his role in the Circle Jerks. But for me, he's in that world. I know has a piece of Black Flag history in him, but it's all about Henry Rollins for me. Would you have an opinion?
Yeah. So when I hear Keith Morris, I think of Circle Jerks. Deny Everything is such a great track too, and for some reason I always equate him to that. He's a lot of fun to listen to. And the Nervous Breakdown EP is as classic as it gets. But Rollins, I think he was a better fit for the band, and I think Keith was born for the Circle Jerks. On the My War album, who could imagine anybody else singing other these things than Henry, right? Is pissed off and the rage that he has.
Yeah.
I couldn't see Keith singing it, but in the same way, can't imagine anyone singing "Wild in the Streets" or "World Up My Ass" like the way Keith does.
Mm-hmm.
I just it has to go to Rollins. I mean, it was impactful. You think of Black Flag, you think of Henry Rollins. I think he was made for them. And again, it's not to take anything away from Keith. I think Keith found his own eventually with the Circle Jerks. So to me, it's Rollins, absolutely.
Yeah, just as a side note, and then I promise, folks, I'll stop talking. I'll let Frank get a few words. And
thanks, man.
You're welcome, buddy. For the longest time, I thought Keith Morris was related to Toby Morris of H2O.
Oh,
yeah, I don't know why. I like they get the same last name. They must be related. And it's just one of those things that you make assumptions, and you're like, all these bands are connected, and you're like, I mean, Toby Morris probably listened to a lot of Circle Jerks, but that's about the extent of it. So anyways, Frank, what are some bands you want to talk about, buddy?
Well, what's funny, too, is Toby. So you have Keith Morris, Morris, and Toby Morse, Morse. Morris. It's
explain that to my dyslexia.
Listen, and the only reason why I bring it up is because I had it. It brought me up because I went through the same thing too. I'm like, oh, they're both names Morris. But Toby's brother Todd, on a side note, who was the bass player for H2O, played in Juliet and the Licks, I'm sorry, and is also playing The Offspring right now. So just a fun little factoid. Another band we could talk about, Mark, and again, we don't have to go into great detail about them, though, is the Misfits, right? So for the longest time, you had Glenn Danzig, and he was, I think, the staple of the band. Now, I don't say he was. He is still the staple of the band. They hear the Misfits, hear that name, you hear that brand, it's Danzig. Now, obviously, he went solo, and he's done a lot of great things that way. However, they did have a 2-album stint with singer Michael Graves, American Psycho and Famous Monster. I remember when Famous Monsters, American Psycho was in 97 and Famous Monsters was in 99. This is before then Jerry Only took over then as lead vocals. Ironically, he recruited former Black Flag guitarist Dez Candina into the band, and of course former Ramones drummer Marky Ramone for their 25th anniversary tour. So what's interesting is when American Psycho came out, I had a person who was such a flag bearer for the album. They said it's absolutely amazing. They said it's a new singer, you got to check it out. I was like, I don't know, the whole new singer bit. I don't know about you, Mark. Well, actually, I do know about you because we've talked about this. American Psycho is a fantastic album.
It's arguably my favorite.
Right?
Black Sabbath. No, God damn it. Misfits record. I did that one on purpose.
I know you did. I know.
So it's one of my favorite. And I think one of the issues with the dancing stuff really is 82, 83. The recording quality just wasn't there, especially for a band record labels could not care less about.
Right.
So and for punks like us, folks at home who are listening that are super into punk rock, you don't care. Those records sound the way they sound, and they sound awesome. But American Psycho 97, it was clean. Oh. It was loud. It sounded like a horror movie. It was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And it just holds a lot of weight for me. And just in that, there was a little bit more song structure. There was a little more meat on the bone.
Yep.
It's a favorite for me.
The songs were a little longer. Absolutely. I mean, the song American Psycho, Speak of the Devil, Dig Up Her Bones. I remember when the first time I heard Resurrection, The Haunting, Shining. I mean, all these songs were just absolutely, I think, fantastic. And I think Michael, his fit, he nails it. He absolutely nails it. It's just so interesting to have a band like that was instrumental in so many ways, and then you get this other singer, a young kid, comes in and just does amazing. Famous Monsters too is also really, really good. I enjoy it big time. I mean, you have the Forbidden Zone, Dust to Dust, Saturday Night. Good stuff. Now, the Jerry Only stuff, listen, I like the Covers album. I think it was really good. And Jerry Only's a heck of a nice guy. I don't say like I know the guy. I just see it in interviews. You can tell he's a genuine, really good dude. Not the singer, though, for the Misfits, right? Now, he just, his thing is that whole sci-fi kind of bit, which kind of makes it maybe a little bit campier. You know what you're getting. But, I mean, forever, I guess it's Glenn's band, right? It's Glenn's kind of, it's part of Glenn's brand as well, right, Mark? Wouldn't it's safe to say that Danzig is, the singer of the Misfits?
Yeah, well, I think it's funny. I think the records most people know are the Misfit 1 and Misfit 2 collections, that have just kind of all of the hits back to back to back to back of all the early Glenn stuff. So I think that's kind of where some of that misconception comes from, that it's, Danzig thing. Because you look at his solo career, it's not that it's so different from what the Misfits did, but that it's clearly got a different direction. Like it's still heavy, it's still rocking, it's still a little macabre, but it's distinctly not the Misfits.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think I'm of the impression that the Misfits are a big ball of yarn that you really have to get into to understand. Whereas I think on the surface, it is easy for people to just kind of suggest that it's Glenn Danzig's band.
Yeah. Now, do you think when they got Michael Graves, it should have been something else?
That's an interesting question.
Another band name?
Possibly, but at the same time, you get all that material to tour on. You've got a new album to support. Maybe it probably was in their benefit to keep the name, but maybe, hey, if you change it, if you call the band American Psycho or Hate the Living, Love the Dead. I only try to name a business after it. You get this. You maybe don't have the stigma of being Glenn Danzig's band. You get a chance to do something fresh, but you never know. Again, look at what happened to All.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, Michael Graves did not disappoint. He did a heck of an awesome job ripping up. So, it's interesting to note. God, there's other bands too, right, that have gone through singers. You get AC/DC. Things like Journey. I don't really care to talk about Journey. I hope you don't either, Mark.
Yeah, I don't. AC/DC brings up an interesting thing, right? And it's something we haven't touched on, which is bands that change singers because their singer died.
Yeah.
Right? So, and you can compare the Bon Scott and the Brian Johnson, thank you, and the Brian Johnson eras and compare them and because a lot of people will say, well, Bon Scott was the better singer,
right,
but they were way more successful with Brian Johnson because they had so much to prove with Back in Black.
Yep.
And they put so much into that record. So it's a really different kind of dynamic when bands change personnel for reasons like that.
Yeah, and here's the thing, though, and that debate could go on, saying, oh, it's definitely all about Bon Scott and all these things, and I get it, but you have to, someone out there has to agree, and maybe more than quite a few people, I would think, have to agree that their voices do share a lot of similarities, and the odds that a band is going to have a singer like Bon Scott, who's then going to pass away, and then they come into a singer like Brian Johnson, who has kind of some similar vocal tones. It's unheard of. It's unheard of. So, in a band like that, I guess they definitely should have kept a name, which they did. I don't think they needed to do another name just because there was a lot of similarities with the two singers' vocal tones.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Who knows? Maybe we can address that another time because it's been going on for a little bit now.
Yeah, I know.
All the listeners are asleep. It's just you and me, Frank. We can talk dirty to each other now.
Yes. That's what I've been waiting for, my friend.
You've lulled them to sleep. You want to tell the folks what we're doing next week?
Yeah. So next week we're going back to two albums. It's not going to necessarily be a track by track review, unless one of them has a smaller track listing, unless that merits it. But we're going to take two albums and we're going to really dissect them. So the first one is going to be from Brian Fallon, who me and Mark were supposed to see. Unfortunately, that show got canceled with everything else going on right now. However, he is coming out with a new album, Local Honey, and I believe it's 8 tracks on that album. And me and Mark are big Brian Fallon and Gaslight Anthem fans, so we want to see what does this third album bring for a very talented singer-songwriter. And with that, also, because we're going to have the time too, we got another album coming out by a pretty prolific band, and that band is Pearl Jam. Their 11th album, Gigaton, is coming out, and we're going to take a look at that album too. Again, that one may not be the track by track, but we're going to gloss over it and kind of talk about some things we like, some things we don't like. The Pearl Jam's always been a tougher band for me to get into, so I really want to hear what they have to bring in 2020, and what does the 2020 version of Pearl Jam sound like. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, this is the 9th album since I gave a shit about Pearl Jam. So no, hey, look, it's going to be interesting to see what 2020 looks like for them. We can assume that they wrote it last year, right? We can see where they are in 2019. Does the battle against Ticketmaster rage on, or are we talking about something new?
Yeah.
It should be interesting. I've always found them kind of pseudo-political. So it'll be interesting to see how overtly political they become.
Very interesting.
Given the atmosphere of the world. So it'll be interesting. And, as Frank mentioned about Brian Fallon and his new record, we were both really big Gaslight Anthem fans. Frank got me turned on to the Gaslight Anthem. His solo stuff has been interesting. It hasn't caught me the same way Gaslight has. So I've got a lot of hopes for this. And, sometimes that can be your biggest enemy, is putting hope into things that, you should trust are going to go one way, but you want them to go the other. So but that's up to me. That's between me and my pillow. So it should be a lot of fun. We want to thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much. It's a lot of fun for us to do. Big props for Mark for really knocking out a lot of cool details in this episode too. So, I hope this is a lot of fun for us. This is really such a passion project. We can't begin to thank anyone who listens to this enough. In all these times when we're all homebound, I hope you guys could escape a little bit and listen to stuff like this. We have a good time putting it together, and we're going to catch you on the next episode, right, Mark?
Absolutely. So if you're listening to this late at night, you can go onto our YouTube channel.
Yep.
There's full videos of Frank stripping down completely to the buff.
With the guitar.
With the guitar. He calls it the natural.
I do.
But only late at night.
Big flesh color instrument.
Big flesh color called the natural. So tune into youtube.com/Frank the Natural. Check out, that's not a real thing. If you're even still listening, thank you for listening. And we'll catch you next time.
You got it, guys. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.